Welcome back to Financial Foundations, Rutland's own monthly market roundup where we break down the headlines and connect them to everyday Vermonters. I'm Dom and this is Steve. We're two local fiduciary financial planners with Green Hill Financial Partners. And we're here to deliver timely updates and clear insight that can help you feel more confident about your finances. And we know these conversations can feel overwhelming sometimes, especially when the news changes week to week. That's why we're here, to make sense of it all, one topic at a time. Whether you're in Brandon, Castleton, or in Pittsford, financial questions rarely come with a roadmap, but that's exactly what we aim to offer.
And each month, we look at three big economic stories, explore how markets have reacted, and then take you behind the scenes into one financial concept that keeps showing up in the news. And we finish things off with our community corner to highlight financial education events and ways to connect locally. This month, we're talking about delayed interest rate cuts, rising concerns over housing affordability, and how seasonal spending trends are impacting consumer behavior. Let's dive into those three key headlines shaping financial landscape right now, starting with interest rates and the Fed's cautious stance.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, the Fed is still taking a cautious stance and holding off on any rate cuts. As we talked about last month, the Federal Reserve has kept its benchmark rate unchanged for 6 straight meetings. While some policymakers and even members of the current administration have pushed for reductions to stimulate growth, the Fed has remained steadfast, and it's because they operate independently. They're able to make those decisions free of political games, allowing it to stick to a cautious, data-driven approach. And the message they have hasn't changed much. They want to see clear, consistent progress on inflation before making any moves. As of May, inflation remained above target, and wage growth is still strong, especially in sectors like healthcare and construction. So why are they being so cautious? Well, it comes down to avoiding something called stagflation. And we mentioned this briefly last month, but here's what it means. It's when prices stay high while the economy slows down. So you get high inflation and high unemployment at the same time. And that's as dangerous for an economy as it is tough to fix, and what the Fed wants to avoid getting stuck in. So by holding those rates steady, they're trying to cool off inflation gradually without putting brakes on job growth or consumer spending. And what does that mean for folks here in Vermont? Well, it means borrowing still isn't cheap. Whether you're pricing out a new car, juggling credit card balances, or trying to get into a home, interest costs are sticking around, for now at least.
Yeah, and to help with that, Dom, Bernie Sanders just introduced a bipartisan bill that would cap credit card interest rates at 10% for 5 years. It's meant to give people a break from those sky-high APRs.
That can help a number of families now when credit card rates are as high as they have been in a while. And there's an upside to the high rates, especially if you're trying to build up your savings. For example, there are some local credit unions, including ones right here in Rutland, that have recently advertised some pretty competitive savings rates. So if it's sitting somewhere earning next to nothing, it could be worth seeing what local options are available. Some comparisons could really pay off. It's a small step, but it's one that can make the current rate environment work for you. And the big takeaway here, when the rates hold steady like this, it's a signal to check on your finances. Whether you're managing debt, setting aside savings, or adjusting to changing expenses, staying proactive can make a big difference, especially when the broader environment is moving slower than we'd all like. Steve, how has the housing market been holding up?
Well, honestly, housing is still one of the toughest areas, Dom. Here in Vermont, the markets are tight. Prices are high, inventory's low, and mortgage rates haven't dropped enough to really ease the pressure. It's still a tough environment for buyers.
Yeah, and just to underscore that, the Vermont State Housing Authority has recently stopped issuing new Section 8 rental assistance vouchers. There's been a $1 million federal funding cut, and this is impacting nearly 500 families, and they're left without that access to vital support, which really highlights just how strained things have become here in Vermont for low-income Vermonters.
Yeah, and Vermont's housing market is especially challenging right now, and not just for low-income families, but for new home buyers across the board. Here in Vermont, the competition is especially fierce. In towns like Barrie, Stowe, and Brattleboro, out-of-state buyers are swooping in, often paying or offering well above asking price. For local families trying to get into their first home or move up to something practical, it can feel like the deck is stacked against them.
Exactly, Steve. I've got some friends who've been in that exact same boat. Every time they put an offer in, it gets outbid by someone putting in way over asking price. And it's been really discouraging for them. And they're starting to wonder if buying a home in Vermont is even realistic anymore.
Yeah, and part of the challenge is that many home buyers who locked in those low mortgage rates during the pandemic, they're just not selling. And that's contributed to today's limited supply and continued price pressure. In places like Montpelier or Rutland, home prices have climbed much faster than wages have. That means that the price to income ratio, or how much house you can afford based on what you earn, it's getting hard to balance. So beyond just buying, higher prices have ripple effects. So property tax assessments often follow market values, which can lead to bigger tax bills, even if you're not planning to move. So for example, Woodstock, which last had its townwide reappraisal in 2016, is scheduled for a new revaluation next year. Property values there have surged, and that's driving up tax rates to match.
Yeah.
So towns like Hartford and Norwich are also beginning revaluations due to outdated assessments. It's really affecting those local tax bills. This is a real concern, especially for retirees or anyone on a fixed income, because a jump in those property taxes can really strain a monthly budget.
Yeah, and you know, I'm seeing that firsthand when I volunteer at the hospital. You wouldn't believe how many people bring this up. Volunteers, staff, even patients, especially those on fixed income. They're very worried about how those new assessments are going to pan out. I even heard a story about a retired couple who added onto their home a few years back, and they've been paying about $15,000 a year in property taxes. Well, they just had a recent revaluation on those improvements, and it brought that tax bill up to nearly $100,000 a year. It's stories like that that really drive home how big these changes can feel.
Yeah, ouch. Sounds like they may not have planned for all those costs out in advance. There's always a lot to think about when buying or renovating a home, though. Especially, the example helps some of our viewers avoid that same oversight, or at least I hope this example has. Now, if you're house hunting, and it's not just about the listing price as we mentioned before, it's about the full picture. Those monthly payments, property taxes, utilities, insurance, if you plan to renovate, and whether the home fits your long-term goals. In a market this tight, knowing those numbers ahead of time puts you in a stronger position, even if you're not the highest bidder.
Yeah, sage advice, Steve. And while many Vermonters are feeling stretched when it comes to housing, we're also seeing a shift in day-to-day spending, especially as the warmer months roll in. Travel, recreation, home projects, they're all picking up steam. People are opening their wallets in different ways, which is typical for this time of year, but it's happening against a backdrop of higher prices and tighter budgets. This is a familiar pattern for us Vermonters. Garden centers are busy, contractors are booked out, and local businesses are gearing up for summer. Seasonal spending like this gives our economy a short-term boost and creates real momentum for small towns and workers. But there's something new in the air this year. As the year kicked off, a viral challenge called the No Buy 25 took social media by storm. It encourages people to cut or reduce all non-essential spending for the year. It struck a nerve. Why? Well, because many folks rang in the new year already deep in debt. Extras like vacations, home upgrades, even takeout were being put on credit. And now with inflation still running hot, even the essentials are going on a card just to get by. We're seeing an increase in those pay later offers almost everywhere, even on groceries and takeout. You might have noticed some fast food apps letting you split a meal into 4 payments. That might sound like a joke, but it's very real. And it's a very slippery slope. When we start thinking of purchases in terms of 5 here, 10 there, we stop thinking about the total cost. It becomes so easy to overextend ourselves without realizing it, especially when interest rates are still high. Those payments stack up fast. Now, we're not saying every buy now, pay later offer is bad. but it is worth pausing to ask what the total cost is going to be over time. And we're definitely not here to tell anybody not to enjoy the summer or skip things that bring joy. But especially in volatile market conditions, the best defense is often financial flexibility. Spending with more intention now can help avoid stress tomorrow. So whether you're planning a road trip, repainting the house, or just trying to keep up with costs, take a breath, check your numbers, and ask, is this something I can truly afford or something I have to finance? Now, Steve, with that in mind, how has the market been reacting to all this?
Well, Don, all of these headlines made waves in the news, they also had ripple effects in the markets. Let's take a look at how investors responded in May. Coming off of a strong spring, investor optimism carried into the new month with solid momentum. Earnings season brought strong results from major companies, fueling hopes for a summer pivot in Fed policy. But that move shifted quickly. Inflation data came in hotter than expected, wage growth continued, both signs that the economy is still running strong. And while that might sound like good news, it actually makes the Federal Reserve a little bit more cautious. So when the economy runs hot, the Fed tends to hold rates steady to avoid stoking more inflation. Then came the Fed minutes, which confirmed a more hawkish tone. But it wasn't just economic data driving the pause. The Fed is also watching new fiscal policy coming out of Washington, especially those reintroductions of the tariffs. So these policies could push prices higher or create new uncertainties for businesses and consumers alike. Fed Chair Jerome Powell made it clear that while the central bank remains independent, uncertainty around trade policy and federal spending is making it harder to predict the economic landscape. And even with strong earnings or job numbers, it might not be enough to prompt rate cuts if broader policy risks are still at play. So while the month began with optimism, it ended with the markets adjusting expectations, once again reminding us that monetary policy doesn't happen in a vacuum. The Fed is balancing not only the economic data, but also the broader consequences of policy decisions coming right out of Washington.
That was very helpful. Thank you, Steve. And when you zoom out, one of the key data points the Fed is watching is that national unemployment rate, which held steady near historic lows in May. And that's great news for workers, but it makes the Fed's job harder. Strong employment fuels consumer spending, and that can keep inflation running hotter than the Fed would like. And consumer sentiment, meanwhile, dipped a little bit this month. Surveys show Americans are really feeling the pinch from those rising prices and elevated debt levels. And concerns around the upcoming special election season are adding to that mix. While not outright panic, it is hesitation. And that shows up in the market's day-to-day moves.
And in terms of performance, some sectors held up better than others. Energy and travel-related stocks showed resilience, largely driven by seasonal trends. And as families started planning summer trips and outdoor projects picked up, demand in those sectors helped balance out some of the more cautious tones elsewhere. Meanwhile, rate-sensitive sectors like housing, tech, and utilities took a step back. Higher borrowing costs made it more expensive to finance home purchases, fund tech expansion, or maintain infrastructure-heavy businesses like those utilities. These sectors often feel pressure faster when interest rates are expected to stay elevated.
Right, and we saw that play out in the bond market. Mid-month yields dipped slightly, and that's often a sign investors are looking for safety or reassessing the timing of future cuts. As a quick refresher, when the bond yields go up, or when the bond prices go up, the yields go down. So a drop in yield means that more money flowed into those bonds. But it wasn't just a fear-based move. It was a flexibility play. Investors aren't running for the exits, they're just adjusting. Think of it as prepping for a summer hike. If there's a chance of storms, you don't cancel, you just pack differently. And that's really what we're seeing now. People are staying invested, but they're using a much more cautious, balanced approach with a stronger focus on diversification.
That's good news because volatility may pick up again as we head into the second half of the year. Corporate earnings, that special election season, global tensions, any one of these could move markets quickly. So for long-term investors, it's not about guessing what will happen next, it's about being ready for a range of outcomes. And that's where personal financial plans come in. Whether it's knowing your risk tolerance, keeping a cushion in savings or an emergency fund, or making sure your portfolio fits your goals, the most important reactions aren't happening on Wall Street, they're happening in households like yours and mine.
Exactly the case, Steve. And that brings us to our concept corner. This is where we dig into a question we hear all the time. Specifically for the month, it's, does timing really matter? Whether it's buying a home, investing, or adjusting that financial plan, the idea of waiting for the right moment comes up again and again. In this month, we're going to unpack that question through the lens of why timing matters and doesn't. So, starting with interest rates, one of the most important lessons for investors is this. Markets don't react just to the news. They react to expectations. That's why we often see those big swings before the Fed even makes a move. The uncertainty, that guessing game, is what drives the volatility.
Right, and to put it in more familiar terms, think of it like prepping your garden. You don't wait until it's hot out. You plan ahead based on the forecast. Investors do the same thing. They try to act before the weather changes or the markets change. And just like Vermont's weather, those forecasts can shift quickly. One week you're expecting sun and the next you're scrambling for tarps. We saw that play out in May. Investors expected a rate cut. They had to recalibrate when the Fed signaled a delay. That adjustment alone sent ripples throughout the markets.
Yeah, and that kind of uncertainty isn't just a Wall Street issue. It's something we're hearing about in everyday decisions too. And that same uncertainty shows up in another question we've been getting a lot lately. Should I buy a house now or wait? Prices are still high, interest rates are holding steady, so it's a tough call for many Vermonters. But here's the thing though, there really is no perfect time. Even if home prices soften a bit, rates could stay high. You might face more competition later. So it's less about the market and more about understanding your numbers and your goals.
And right now, the bigger challenge isn't just affording the home, it's figuring out how to compete for one. In today's market, preparation is everything. That means going in with a clear understanding of your budget and getting fully pre-approved, not just pre-qualified, and being ready to act when the right property hits the market. We're also seeing homebuyers get pretty creative, Dom, teaming up with family members, expanding their search into surrounding towns, or considering homes that may need a little work but offer that better long-term value. And when people ask us, should I wait until rates come down? We always bring it back to their personal timeline. If your life, your job, and your budget are ready, then the best strategy might not be waiting. It might be planning smart, buying smart, and refinancing later if the rates improve.
Again, I can't say how great that advice is. And it's exactly right. Timing the market perfectly is tough in any environment, and housing is no exception. Flexibility often matters more than perfection. It's about making a smart decision today, not chasing a flawless one tomorrow. And one more piece to this timing puzzle, seasonal investing trends. You've probably heard the old phrase, sell in May and go away. The idea is that markets tend to underperform during summer months, but the data shows a mixed bag. Some summers are quiet, sure, but others bring strong gains, especially in sectors like travel, retail, and home improvement. And that's even more true when inflation is high or consumer behavior is shifting. So while seasonal trends can be interesting, they're far from a reliable rule, and they're no substitute for a proper long-term strategy.
Yeah, and right here in Vermont, we've got our own rhythm. Construction ramps up, tourism brings in fresh dollars, farmers markets and fairs fuel local economies. Vermont's tourism sector, for instance, contributes approximately $4 billion annually and accounts for 10% of the state's workforce.
Wow.
Events like Tourism Economy Day really highlight the industry's significance and its role in our seasonal economic boost. If you pull out of the market just because it's summer, you might miss out on some real activity. So when we say timing matters and doesn't, here's what we mean. Yes, timing affects outcomes, but trying to hit that perfect moment, whether it's for investing, home buying, or really anything else, is almost impossible. So what matters more is having a plan and the flexibility to adapt when conditions change.
Again, that's the simple truth there, Steve. You know, one of the golden rules in the investment world is this. It's not about timing the market. It's about time in the market. Whether you're planting a garden, buying a home, or saving for retirement, it's that consistent effort that leads to long-term success, not waiting around for the perfect moment. So instead of asking, is now the right time? It's a better question to ask, am I prepared, and does this decision fit my life? The shift in mindset puts you back in the driver's seat. And even personal decisions like this don't happen in bubbles. They're shaped by larger policy around us. And now that we've unpacked how timing plays into personal decisions, we'll zoom out again and look at the bigger forces shaping those choices, both nationally and here in Vermont. This month's policy deep dive builds directly off of that concept corner. Timing feels tricky, in part because of the Fed's higher for longer stance on interest rates. But what does that actually mean in practice for individuals, families, communities? Well, at its core, higher for longer means just that. They plan to keep interest rates elevated through at least 2025 and maybe into 2026. They're in no rush to cut rates because of inflation. Even though it was lower than last year, it hasn't reached their target. And at the same time, wages are continuing to rise in key sectors like healthcare, construction, and government. And that adds to the inflationary pressure that reinforces the Fed's cautious approach.
And so while that Fed policy helps cool inflation gradually, it also keeps borrowing expensive. For mortgages, business loans, car financing, credit cards, and more. That's where it starts to affect households directly. And it has broader implications for Vermont's economy. With rates staying high, it becomes more costly for local builders and developers to finance new housing. And for everyday Vermonters trying to buy, renovate, or refinance, those higher rates can create real hesitation.
Exactly, and that's why we're seeing movement at the state level to try and loosen those structural bottlenecks, not by adjusting rates, but by improving conditions for building more homes in the first place. One of the big efforts underway is reforming Act 250, and that's Vermont's decade-old land use law. And it's been essential in protecting our environment and the scenic landscapes we all know and love, but many experts and local officials are saying it's too restrictive, especially in those designated downtown or village centers where growth makes the most sense.
Well, Dom, did you know that Governor Phil Scott has signed 2 pieces of legislation focusing on economic development and budget appropriations? I mean, these laws aim to address housing affordability and support infrastructure improvements.
I didn't, Steve, and it's great to hear that the government is taking action to help pain points for our communities. And the goal isn't to eliminate that environmental review, it's to just streamline the process in areas that already have the infrastructure, like roads, water, sewer, and electricity. That way, Vermont can add much needed housing without sacrificing its environmental integrity or its community character.
Well, take Rutland, for example. It has the infrastructure in place, but newer housing projects have faced longer approval times. That's what lawmakers are trying to ease.
Exactly right. And we're starting to see some movement. Construction's now underway on Maplewood Commons, which is a project that's going to bring 30 permanently affordable units to the area. It's part of a much larger plan to create 1,000 new homes across all of Vermont by 2028. It's a good example of what's possible when policy, planning, and need start to line up.
Well, that's exciting to hear, Dom. And it shows the growing momentum around local zoning reform. In towns like South Burlington, Barrie, and Brattleboro, officials are looking at ways to allow for denser housing options like duplexes and triplexes in neighborhoods that are already walkable and well-connected. These changes could open the door for more mixed-income housing and smaller, more affordable homes, especially important to first-time home buyers and seniors looking to downsize but stay in their communities.
And to be clear, these aren't silver bullets, they're gradual shifts. But in a state like Vermont, where supply is tight and housing costs keep climbing, making it easier to build responsibly is a key part of that solution. So when we think about national policy like interest rates and local policy like zoning and land use, they're two sides of the same coin. One influences how much it costs to build or borrow, and the other determines what we're allowed and where we're allowed to develop.
Mm-hmm. And for Vermonters wondering when it's going to get easier to find a home that fits their needs and their budget, these policy shifts are an important piece to watch. They won't solve everything overnight, but they could make the road ahead a lot more accessible. And while policymakers work on big picture solutions, there's also important work happening right here at the local level. So let's head into this month's Community Corner.
Heck yeah, thank you, Steve. I love the Community Corner. So each month in our Community Corner, we highlight events and opportunities to build financial confidence right here in Vermont. So if you've never joined us for a table talk session, we'd love to have you at one. These events are designed to bring trusted financial guidance into the community without a paywall or a pitch. It's about open, honest conversations where people ask real questions and get clear answers. We always say financial confidence begins with access, and that's exactly what these sessions aim to provide. In May, we hosted two great discussions. One was at the Godnick Adult Center right in Rutland, and the other was at the Young at Heart Senior Center over in Poultney.
Those were both excellent events. A few questions came up about whether setting up a trust makes sense and where to even go for financial guidance. And what really stood out was there was a thirst for knowledge in our communities, and the learning went both ways for sure. Mm-hmm. We also hosted a seminar at the Godnick Center called Market Shocks and National Events. And that session focused on the headlines and the emotional side of investing, how to recognize stress, stay grounded, and avoid reactive decisions when the news cycle gets intense.
That one was a lot of fun, Steve. There was great participation, really thoughtful questions, and it was interesting to look at it from an emotional perspective. But if you missed it, don't worry. We've got a full lineup of events coming in June, and we'd love to see you there. On the 11th, we'll be at the Bennington Senior Center from 10:30 to 2 for another table talk session. Whether you've got specific questions, general concerns, or just want to listen in, it's a welcoming place to connect and feel supported. No question is too small, and chances are somebody else is wondering the same thing. And then on the 17th from 11 to noon, we're back at the Godnick Adult Center for a special seminar, Navigating Financial Hardships. So whether you're facing challenges yourself or supporting someone who is, this session is going to offer practical steps and highlight local resources that can help make things feel more manageable.
Sounds like we've got a lot of good events planned for the rest of spring. We believe strong communities are built on shared knowledge, and so whether you're attending one of these events or just telling a neighbor what you've learned, education is empowering. If you'd like to attend one of these sessions or host one in your area, reach out and let us know. We'll share updates on PEGTV and local bulletin boards, and of course we'll be back next month with more highlights.
As we wrap the May edition of Financial Foundations, here's a big idea we hope sticks with you. There's no perfect time, not for investing, not for buying, and definitely not for predicting the markets. But there is real value in understanding how timing works and building flexibility into your financial life. And that's what we aim to help with, giving you the tools and context to make thoughtful decisions no matter what the headlines say.
And whether you're tuning in from Bennington, Middlebury, or your living room here in Rutland, we're grateful you're part of this conversation. If you have comments or feedback on this show, we'd love to hear from you. Please send them to PEGTV. This program is made for the community, and we want to keep it relevant and grounded in the conversations you care about.
And whether things feel calm or chaotic, the most important step is being engaged, and we're glad you're all here doing just that. Thanks for spending some time with us, and as always, take care of yourselves, take care of your neighbors. I'm Dom Stilwell.
And I'm Steve Morneau. We'll see you next time on Financial Foundations.